Hope you enjoyed that beautiful slideshow of John. I know I want to see it in full. I only saw it in part. So don't worry. I think it's going to be played again at the end of our service today. And then will it be also in the reception? And also in the reception, which is going to be over in the community room. So thank you all so much for being here, for gathering to celebrate the life of this beloved one to us, John Arthur Marsyla. Arnold, excuse me. John, I started right out the gate, and I got the A wrong. It's Arnold. And welcome to all of you who are joining us online. We're so glad that you were able to tune in and to be a part of this community celebration, because indeed that is what it is. It is a celebration of life. We like to call it that versus a memorial to emphasize the fact that we are here not because John died so much, but because he lived. And it is because of his life and the impact that his life had on us in so many various ways and our gratitude for those various ways that he touched us that we're here together to honor him and to honor our memories, to honor our experience, to honor our grief. Whatever it is that is present for us here, we let it flow. It may be moments of joy and laughter, and there may be moments of grief and tears, and it's all welcome. We are in a safe place for whatever you experience today as we move through a beautiful program that his daughter Kira and her husband Mark and several others contributed to creating. And you're going to hear from grandchildren and grandchildren, and children. And although there are many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, 13 of each. So yeah, beautiful family. Ray Joyce and John, of course, are devoted members of this community, have been a part of this sacred place to many of us for many years, devoted members, regular attendees of the 9:30 service, where Ray Joyce was our lead usher for some time, and she and John both ushers and greeters for us for many years. John also served on the ministerial search committee that hired me, so I'm always personally very grateful for John. And I always felt a kinship with him, even from the beginning of meeting him and then later meeting Ray Joyce. Just have always loved them. I know my wife Brentley and I have often talked about how much we enjoy chatting with the two of you. So, as I mentioned, many of John's children are here and Ray Joyce's children. We have Kira and her husband Mark and Paul sitting here next to Ray Joyce, and David and his wife Jenny and their children, and Michelle. And so thank you for being here, all of you. I'm sure John's presence is with us as well, and his heart is feeling the joy and the connection and the love. You know, that's what grief is, really. It's a testimony to our love. So when we feel grief, it is an honoring and a testimony to the love and the connection and all that we have felt over the years. So you'll have an opportunity to share your memories and your stories and anything you want to share about John later in the community room. For our time here, we have a planned program because there are so many family members who want to share today. So I look forward to hearing from them, and I hope you do too. For those people that couldn't be here that are John's people, I want to acknowledge some of them, his siblings, Jim and Edward and Margaret. And many people, you know, there are always in a lifetime so many people that the rest of us won't even ever know who were touched by John's life in some way, who were moved or inspired or had a moment of maybe even a passing connection or a feeling of uplift or some kind of positive impact that occurred because John Arnold Marsyla walked the earth and passed by them. Or maybe many of his students over the years as a college professor. Can you imagine having John as a professor? I mean, that would be so fun. I would be the first to sign up for his class. Because his laid-back kind of style and all of the gifts that he would bring with that would be such a welcome experience, I think, for any college student. So I imagine there were so many students who were profoundly impacted by John's life, by his words, by the way that he showed up, the way that he connected with them. I'm sure many of his grandchildren could attest to that. the way that he lifts you up, supports you, is present with you. So we honor, too, those lives that have been somehow impacted by his. And in particular, his love of literature and poetry and all of that with his students, I'm sure, was a big part of that. His kindness, his creativity, his sense of humor, his courage, his gratitude. We are grateful for all of it, I know. And today, as I mentioned, there could be tears of sadness, there might be moments of joy and laughter, and I think that both of those would be very honoring of John. So in honor of him, let's take a moment to pray. And so as we drop down into that space, the heart space, the place where we connect with the presence of divine love, it is love that brings us here. It is love that connects us with all that is, and specifically with the soul who walked beside us in some way on this life journey. We are so grateful, Spirit, for him, for the gift of John, for his presence, for his laughter, for his silly jokes and his intelligence, his kindness, and so many other ways that he showed up for us and with us. We are so grateful that this soul was fashioned to be who he was and was put onto this earth to live out a kind of divinely ordered life that included all of us in some way. And we are reminded in these moments when we come together to honor a soul who walked beside us on this earth of the preciousness of life. It lifts us up higher to be more, to emulate the admirable traits that John embodied for us, expressed throughout his life, to remind us of all that we can be, for us to make the most of our own lives. So for these many, many gifts that keep unwrapping and unfolding for us as we celebrate John, remember him and remember the preciousness of life. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And so it is. Whenever we gather in this way, we are often faced with maybe more fully accepting and understanding this thing we call death. What is it? Here in Unity, we call it making your transition. And sometimes that is helpful because it allows us to emphasize this idea that it's just simply a doorway opening and another one closing, or one closing and another opening, a kind of rebirth. Sometimes we just need to say somebody died so we can feel the reality of those words of that ending. So there are many different ways to express this idea of death. But it is that ending and new beginning, it is that rebirth idea that I want to especially highlight for us. Because while we may grieve the loss of John's physical presence, we know, many of us believe and feel that there is more than simply an earthly physical life. That there is a spirit that animates our being, that gives us life, and that is the essence and the truth of life that carries on for us and beyond us in our next iteration, whatever that may be. So in some ways, there is that freedom of discarding the density of the physical body and continuing on as the essence of who we are. So life can be, or death can be considered like life. It can be considered a rebirth. It can be considered a graduation. And I think as an educator and lifelong learner, John might like that analogy best. So congratulations, John. Could kind of see him tossing his graduation cap like, I'm out of here, guys, and it's really okay because I'm always with you. He's always with us. It's not the same. We can't grab his hand and hug him, and that is where the grief is. But it is the same in the sense that there is a conscious connection, a memory of the echo of his laughter, of moments that we had, of conversations, of things he said to us that are forever embedded in our hearts, that live in the cells of our beings. Those are the ways that he lives on in us and through his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a long legacy of people who carry on even his DNA. Death is a passing from one horizon to a next. It's one set of loved ones saying goodbye as another welcomes us home. You know, John was a sailor. He met his love of sailing and learned to sail in Florida, if I understand correctly, in the 10 years that he and Ray Joyce spent there in Florida, and continued that passion on with his son David here in California. And Henry Van Dyke gives this description of death as a sailboat. I'm standing on a seashore. A sailboat at my side spreads its white sails in the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. It's an object of beauty and strength. And I stand and I watch it at length until it's a speck of white cloud just where the sea and the sky come to mingle with each other. And then someone at my side says, "There, it's gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight, that's all. The sailboat is just as large in mast and hull and spar as it was when it left my side, and just as able to bear its load of living weight to its destined harbor. The sailboat's diminished size is in me, not in it. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "There, it's gone," there are other eyes watching it coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here it comes!" And that is dying. So there was a group of people on earth that said, "Oh, look at this precious baby." As John came into this earth, probably like many of us do, wailing. And tiny and red and wrinkled and beautiful, with those otherworldly eyes that newborns have and that otherworldly kind of fresh and newness. And when he came into this world, he was welcomed and celebrated in Cook, Minnesota. It was 84 years ago. And when he came in to Finnish parents, Lily and Emily and Arnold John Marsyla. And they welcomed him along with others in the family and beyond who welcomed him. And on or near January 12th, when he made his transition, John was ushered once again from his warm and cozy home in Rossmore beside his beloved Ray Joyce. And another gathering was in that invisible realm that we can't always touch, but we can sense and feel. And there was a gathering there of people who had loved John and known John on earth, and maybe even other beings who had loved and known John that we don't know about. And they welcomed him home in that same way. John and Ray Joyce have often been described as inseparable. And so we know that truth, that even now they are inseparable. That there is an energy, a love that can never be broken, a bond that is always present, even when physicality is no longer there. And that their expressions of gratitude for each other, for their lives, for their family, for everything that they experienced were frequent and free and heartfelt. John had 2 children, who I mentioned, Kira and David, with his first wife, Sandra. And when John and Ray Joyce met and married, their family was blended together, I'm told, in an effortless, graceful, loving way. Ray Joyce's children, Mark and Michelle and Paul, all naturally became siblings with Kira and David. Often, as I mentioned, at this sense of John and Ray Joyce, there was a mutual kind of commitment and inseparability, not only to each other, but to their values, to the way that they moved through the world together. And they had a mutual commitment that family and friends were really important. And they maintained those strong bonds over the years, from Minnesota to Florida to California and everywhere in between where there might have been somebody that they cared about. And then finally landing here in California and being nearer to 3 children and many grandchildren was really special to them. The English language offers many different ways of saying something like unwavering bravery. Things like courage, resilience, grit, defiance. The Finns, which is John's ancestral heritage, have one word. It's called sisu. I hope I'm saying that right, sisu. And it characterizes John so beautifully of how he met the challenges of life and how he emulates for us and shows us by his own life example how we too can meet the inevitable challenges of life. He started out with a difficult childhood, and he overcame it with the spirit of sisu. One way he did that was by committing himself to getting an education, because he saw a way out and a way through and a way up by becoming educated, and it mattered to him a lot. And so he became class president at the historic Duluth Central High School. He studied at several universities over the years, ultimately earning a PhD in English from Kent State University, and then going on to become a college professor. Education mattered. And that was part of his mojo in sisu, right? His approach. In the decade that John and Ray Joyce lived in Florida, they endured lots of hurricanes, including Charlie, Ivan, Jeannie, Dennis, and Wilma. I remember some of those. But John met whatever came their way with humor and grace. I witnessed that when he was diagnosed with cancer, how he met it with such sisu, stoicism in a way, but also an open-hearted kind of humor and willingness to accept what is and to walk with it. Despite his many accomplishments, John often said that his life's ambition was to be a beach bum. And he and Ray Joyce experienced one of the greatest griefs parents can ever experience, the death of their son, Mark. They always supported each other, walked beside each other through the joys and the sorrows of life. In the past 5 years, as John moved through, danced with, met this thing we call cancer, he met the pain, the discomfort, the grief, and all of that with a kind of sisu, a kind of grace as well. Ray Joyce was beside him every step of the way, not only as his beloved wife and best friend, but as his primary caregiver. And he was very grateful. He wrote this book of poems through his process called Dancing with the Crab, poems about my cancer journey, about a cancer journey. And in it, one of his poems is really, well, they're all beautiful, but one of them in particular stood out for me called My Ray of Light, R-A-E. It's a dedication, of course, to Ray Joyce as his primary caregiver, and he says in it, my ray rises with the sun to share her light with the world. Busying herself preparing breakfast, she moves confidently across the kitchen. Over hot tea and morning devotions, we center ourselves for the day, and from a centered place, we face my cancer diagnosis. He met life not only with sisu, but with faith. John was grounded in spiritual principle and practice, and it carried him through. During radiation treatments, he shared his awareness of the divine at work He wrote in his poem, "Return to the mask." But there's another force at work too, the power of divine energy sent by my well-wishers. I sense their energy in between the rays of radiation, a force more powerful than cancer. On a regular basis, John and Ray Joyce enjoyed the spiritual practice of reading aloud a message from the daily word devotion, the daily devotional at Unity called the Daily Word. And on both dates of John's birth and his death, there is some relevancy. The first, on the date of his birth, is December 4th, 1939. He says, the affirmation for the day said, "I rest in the quietness of confidence in God, and God's harmony pervades my being." I sense that kind of quiet confidence that he had, a divine sense of harmony that he carried with him, that he carried on his way in and on his way out. And John lived a life full of kindness and caring and compassion. And on the day of his transition, the word was kind, and this was the affirmation: "I am kind, caring, and compassionate." Do you want to say that with me? I am kind, caring, and compassionate. So I visited with John and Ray Joyce a couple of times in the last year, and the first time I was struck by these two statues that were in their living room. And I said something about it. There was a tall African warrior, and then next to it, this tiny rendition of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like a little plastic statue. We actually had one too. And I said, "That's interesting how those two are together." And he immediately said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, I like those because they show two different kinds of power." And I was so delighted by the experience of seeing this image and hearing John say why it was important to him or why he saw this. It encapsulated him so well. His subtle sense of humor, his intelligent and inclusive regard for humanity, his love of art, and his respect for women as equals. It was all there in that simple statement. He was a man ahead of his generation. He was a man observant of his times and aware of the deeper spiritual truths that permeate life. I asked him then if I could take a picture because I wanted to just really remember that moment and the delight. He was a beautiful blend of masculine and feminine energy. He was gentle and strong. He was a whole man with God's harmony pervading his being. He loved activities like poetry and football. On my most recent visit, he was really excited to share with me a poem that his son David wrote. And it was about their shared passion for football. He treasured it. And I welcome David to share that Vikings poem with us at this time.
Thank you, Kristen. That was really beautiful. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm John's son, David. My dad and I, we used to do quite a few things together. One of the things Kristen mentioned, we used to go sailing together. We started sailing a few times in Minnesota. It's pretty cold there. It was much warmer sailing with him in Florida. And then also after they moved out here, he sailed with us. We had a boat on the San Francisco Bay, and so we really enjoyed doing that together. We also used to play tennis together and other fun activities. The last few months, obviously, were really difficult for my dad. He got to a point where he could certainly no longer play tennis. He couldn't really walk. He couldn't really get out of the house much. But one of the things we could still do together that we both enjoyed was to watch the Vikings play football. Growing up in Minnesota, we were both Vikings fans, and it was something we shared. And so over the last winter, I spent many weekends over at his place in Walnut Creek, watching the Vikings games, and there were lots of good, exciting games this winter. Some of them almost gave me a heart attack, but another thing that Dad loved, which you've heard a little about, and you'll hear more about, was poetry. And so when we were trying to think about what we could give Dad for his birthday this last December, we had this idea of, hey, let's find some poems that we could read for him, something he might like. And I decided to take it a step further and write a poem about one of my early childhood memories of my dad taking me to a Vikings game back in frozen Minnesota. And so I wrote the poem, and he loved it so much he asked Ray Joyce to frame it, and which she did. And so this will be proudly on display. And so I thought I would share that with you. It was something he liked. Memories of a Vikings game with Dad. Just a glimmer of memory from when I was young, of watching the Vikings and freezing my bum. Snow all around us on metal bleacher seats, players below with ice on their cleats. The old outdoor stadium before it would fall to make enough room for a giant mega mall. Dad got some tickets, but I'm not sure who from. A colleague, a coworker, or even a chum? Did he pay for the tickets? Because Dad is quite cheap. Must have been gifted because prices are steep. Maybe not this time because the outside was frozen and our seats were the kind no one would have chosen. Did we really see Tarkington in his last year, surrounded by cheering and drinking of beer? Or was this a dream that didn't happen to me? Is the memory imagined or seen on TV? I can't be too sure because I think I was 8, but the way I remember the day, it was great. 45 years gone, and this could be their year, and I'm thankful to share it with Dad and a cheer. And I just wanted to say a couple more words before I hand it off to my stepsister, Michelle. Over the past few months, the one thing that really struck me about Dad was that he really wanted to make sure that everyone knew that he loved them. He said it many times over and over again. And of course, he told us that growing up and told us that as adults, but it just was so important to him that, before it was too late, he told us all how much he loved him. And so I just wanted to say, Dad, if you're listening or if you're watching this on YouTube, I don't know what kind of coverage you guys get up there, but I just want to say I love you too, Dad. So thanks.
That was beautiful, Dave. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle. I'm Ray Joyce's daughter, and John was my stepdad. And John came into my life when I was 13. And, he's an educator, and he did teach me so much. And as my dad, he was really a present dad in my life. He taught me really kind of practical things like how to drive. And, and now that I've had a daughter who has obtained her driver's license, I know how scary that was for him. And John, my dad, was also very, very cautious. I remember when he was first dating my mom, and we would go for long walks in Minnesota, and there are a lot of snowbanks, and if he saw a car coming, even though we might have even been on a sidewalk, although the suburbs often don't have sidewalks, but anyway, we would be walking along, and he would launch us into a snowbank. He was so fearful a car was going to try to run us over. So, some of the practical lessons were learning to drive, learning to change the oil in the car. We only really did that once. It took about 4 hours. But, it was good. I did learn how to do that from him. But he also taught me some more precious lessons, more maybe subtle, but the ones that really live on. Although I do still drive, so there's that. But the value of education. He, was the first person, I think, with a PhD that I knew. Certainly the first person with a PhD I loved. And then, with that kind of encouragement and guidance, I attained my PhD. And he always valued questioning, critical thinking. And he was always encouraging me to question things and to debate things. And the other wonderful, wonderful lesson that lives on is his lesson of the soothing joy of humor. And I know I'm crying, this is not humorous, but there will be a lot of humor today, because he was all about that dry humor. It was wonderful. And when he came into my life, I was 13. Can be a very dark period in many people's lives, right? And his humor was just incredibly refreshing. And he would make me laugh so much I cried. I will miss him. But as David said, he was really, really earnest in making sure we knew that he loved us. And he knew that he was loved. And a funny kind of episode very close to the end is he would say, "I'm going to miss you." And I remember thinking, I don't think you will miss us, but we are really going to miss you. And now even today, I'm facing some really difficult challenges. And I wish he were here to help me and guide me. And be that rock that he always has been in my life. And I'm really lucky. I do feel very lucky that I'm 55 this year. I don't even remember. I'm in my mid-50s, okay? And I still need my parents. I still want them. I still value their help and guidance and strength. And I was really lucky. I had a strong and guiding father in John. And many children, including my own, have not been that lucky to have that strength for as long as I got to enjoy that. And so, thank you, John. I love you.
Thank you, Michelle, to get my tears going also. I'm Paul Cunet, and the stepson from John, a wonderful man. About 37 years ago, March 22nd, 1986, I attended a wedding to join a wonderful couple located in a beautiful conservatory, Como Park in St. Paul, Minnesota. Along me was my wife, Beth, and our daughters. I was, and still am, a biker, never dressing up. I wore my freshest jeans with a shiny chain, securing my wallet in my pocket, and my newest and most attractive sweater. The photographer was puzzled. He approached me, told me, "We're going to take some pictures, so you better get dressed up." And I told him I am already dressed. He was still puzzled, so he took a look at the couple, and they nodded. That's one example of the acceptance that I appreciate. Years later, after learning how intelligent John Marsyla was, and recognizing his acceptance of me, that was totally amazingly valuable. I owe him at his memorial to dress up as much as I can. I loved him and I miss him.
I do not know why I wore mascara today. So I'm John's daughter, Kira. This is my wonderful husband, Mark. He told me to say I'm your husband because he thought wonderful sounded sarcastic, but I'm not being sarcastic. So those of you who are here or watching, obviously you knew my dad, and you've also heard now, today, that he was a teacher, a tennis player, a sailor, a poet, and he also had a great sense of humor, also has been mentioned, and he loved to laugh. So what we thought we would do is try to pay tribute to him by attempting to make you all laugh by sharing some dad jokes, the kind of simple, corny, really silly jokes that he frankly just loved.
Yeah. Okay, so a priest, a rabbi, and a Unity Church reverend
No.
all walk into a bar. She's right there. She's laughing.
No, we're going to stick
thought
to
it was
what
funny?
we're going to stick to what we agreed upon. Okay, so this is a legit dad joke. So here we go. Why do you never see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're so good at it.
I'm reading a novel now where the main character has some spinal injuries. That's his backstory.
Okay. How many telemarketers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one, but they have to do it during dinner time.
I recently read that by law, you have to have your headlights on when it's raining in Sweden. How am I supposed to know when it's raining in Sweden?
So there you go. You got to love a good dad joke.
Okay, a priest, a rabbi, and a Unity Church reverend are fighting a zombie war.
No. Okay.
It's right here. He's laughing.
All right. So there's one last joke that we wanted to share, and it's actually a joke that my dad was known for. It's not necessarily a funny joke, but what was funny was watching him try to tell this joke because he couldn't get through the first line without literally doubling over in laughter. So he thought it was great, and I will encourage anyone who knows the punchline to please shout it out at the appropriate time. And I'm looking at all my family members, so you too. Okay, here's the joke. A duck walks into a drugstore to buy some chapstick. The clerk looks him up and down and says, "Duck, how are you going to pay for that chapstick?" And the duck says, "Put it on my bill." There you go. Well, thanks for laughing.
Those of you who did laugh.
Yes, most of you did. We got a good, and Dad, love you, and I think he would have. Oh, grandkids. Oh, I could do this. 3 of his grandchildren, Beckett, Elle, and Pearl, will now read a poem.
So my name is Beckett. I'm John's grandson.
My name is Pearl. I'm John's granddaughter. And I'm Elle. I'm also John's granddaughter. So every year on our birthday, John would write us a poem, or maybe not write us a poem, but select a poem to give to us as a gift. So we wanted to give a gift back and read a poem for him.
So this is a modified version of To My Grandfather by Georgia Harkness. A giant pine, magnificent and old, stood staunch against the sky, and all around shed beauty, grace, and power. Within its fold, birds safely reared their young.
The velvet ground beneath was gentle, and the cooling shade gave cheer to passers-by. Its towering arms, a landmark stood, erect and unafraid, as if to say, "Fear not from life's alarms." It fell one day. Where it had dauntless stood was loneliness and void. But men who passed paid tribute and said, "To know this life was good. It left its mark on me. Its work stands fast." And so it lives, such life no bonds can hold, this giant pine, magnificent and old. Thank you.
Hey, Rejoice, how you doing? Good afternoon. My name is Ron, and here on my script, it says, "It is an honor and a privilege to be speaking with you this afternoon." But being on the same platform with all of John's family, it just really became an honor and a privilege to be here this afternoon. And one of the reasons it's such an honor is my friendship with John never left this building. Ray Joyce and John and I would meet for the past 10 years, minus the COVID time, and just stand here in the sanctuary and talk 2 to 4 times a month, maybe 5 to 20 minutes. We never had a meal together. We never met each other's friends and family. But the one thing I wish John and I could have done together is to watch a Niner Vikings snow game. Me in my scarlet and gold John Brody jersey, and John in his purple People Eater purple Fran Tarkington jersey. That would have been cool. The only time I met John outside of the sanctuary was when I visited Ray Joyce and him 3 or 4 times at their house during the month before his transition. We were able to have a couple good conversations, and I was honored to spend some time with him and Ray Joyce at his bedside just before his transition. I have come to realize that John and I are soul buddies. And I know now that my friendship means as much to John as his means to me. This is because we walk the same spiritual path. We believe in the many of the same spiritual truths. And I would like to talk about one of those truths right now. If you look over to the right, you'll see three paintings, and these are Unity's spiritual principles, or their main spiritual principles. And I would like to talk about the one in the middle, co-creating life. So for hundreds and hundreds of years, millions and billions of people have believed in the old adage, the kingdom of God is within you. In Unity, we like to say, God is everywhere present. And for us, that means that 100% of God is everywhere in every moment. This also means that God is within us 100% at every moment. Now, this does not mean that God's hanging out, all right? God's just not hanging out within us. But we are part of God. And in Unity, one of the terms we use for God is oneness. And so oneness is one of us, and we are part of oneness. And because of this, when we are aware of the God within us, we are able to express God's aptitudes through our unique beings and share them with the world around us. And as I knew before today, and as I know even more now, John was very good at expressing God outward. When you were with John and he was expressing love or peace or wisdom or sorrow or empathy or even dad jokes, he was co-creating God with you. This is really important to know, because when you leave here today, please know that God, not only is God with you, but John is with you. Since we are all part of God, when we make the transition from this plane of physical senses, and we move onto the plane beyond these physical senses, we are still who we are. We are still one with God, and that never changes. And so John is always with you. Every time you are aware of the God within you, and it doesn't matter what spiritual path you walk, as long as that's true for you, when you are aware of God, John is also present at the same time, and that always will be. I truly believe that John wanted me to express this to you today, because he wants you to know, just as Kristen said earlier, that he will always be with you. So thank you for letting me share that with you today. And I've never said this in front of a crowd before, but go Vikings. John expressed God, who couldn't be here today. So let us watch some videos of their memories of John.
Okay, my name is Jim Marsyla. I'm John's brother, and I'm sending a message in celebration of John's life. John, Jim, and Ed, the Marsyla brothers. John was 2.5 years older than me and 3.5 years older than Ed. The incidents I'm relating are from the time we lived on my grandmother's farm in Lennon Grove, Minnesota, 10 miles northwest of Cook, Minnesota. John was the leader of our trio, the one who we looked up to, the one who kept us on the straight and narrow. He was a surrogate for our imperfect father. The time on the farm reminds me of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn's adventures in Hannibal, Missouri. We mostly had to devise our own entertainment. On one occasion, John decided we should build a raft to navigate the Little Fork River, which ran through our property. It was late May, and the ice was gone, but the water was freezing yet. Near the river, we began cutting popple logs for the logs that would form the base of our raft. We used some boards as cross pieces to hold the logs together. When we finished, we pushed it into the river. To our chagrin, it sank. I guess you can't use green lumber to build a raft. Another calamity of that project was that when we got out of the river, our legs were peppered with bloodsuckers. Later, we did, however, make a raft using large old punky wood. It turned out to be very buoyant, and we were able to pole up and down the river. On another occasion, we got a plan from a Nabisco shredded wheat box outlining a blueprint to build a Sioux-style teepee. We built it on Fox Den Hill. It was about 10 feet high. We didn't have any buffalo hides or canvas to cover the poles. We did, however, have gunny sacks which we stitched together. We thought it was pretty cool, though it was a bit leaky. Later, when we moved to Duluth, we spent less time together as we each made new friends from our new classmates. But I'll always remember our time on the farm and the fun I had with Ed and John.
Hi, my name is Griff, after my maiden name Griffiths. My real name is Cindy, and I've been friends with Ray Joyce and John for over 40 years. I wish I could be there today, but since I can't, I'm sending this short video message. John was my first boss at Cenex when I was just a 21-year-old out of college going up to the Twin Cities to be Marilee Tyler Moore, but I ended up at Cenex instead of WCCO. And came to know Ray Joyce and John about the same time, and I was so excited when they got together because it was love at first sight and soulmates, and they have enjoyed such a wonderful life together with friends and family. And I know that John will be Ray Joyce's guardian angel, so he can stay as close to her as possible, and will be sorely missed by all his family and friends. I found out also later that John was a writer and a sailor like me, and I cherished the time they came to visit me in Kansas one year. And I just know it's going to be lonely for you, Ray Joyce, but John will be with you every minute. You just can't see him. And just holding you in light and love, Ray Joyce. And just what a great way to have a celebration of John's life, because it was a great life, loved by so many, and he's out of pain now. And we just have to go on the memories. What beautiful memories. We know you're there, John, and we'll see you again soon.
Hi, I'm Mary Rogers. I taught with John for many years, and it was a delight because John had such a great sense of humor, and he really cared about his students and took a great interest in them, as well as in his fellow colleagues. And I have appreciated how generous he was. I went to visit him and Ray Joyce in Naples one time, and they took me out. We went to a wonderful restaurant, and then in San Francisco, they took my grandson and I around to look at various colleges, and we had a wonderful time. Went to a special restaurant on the ocean. I just remember such wonderful times with John and Ray Joyce. Very glad to have had John in my life.
Dear Ray Joyce and family and friends of John Marsyla, I am Julia McGregor, one of John's colleagues from Embry Hills Community College. I met John because we shared the same office warren there in the Fine Arts Building, and we started out becoming friends because we talked to each other about what we were doing in our English classes and what went well and especially what went poorly, and helped each other. And John's laughter and wry humor was always a day brightener. But I want to tell you another story about John. He had a classroom that was also used by a health teacher, and she had the back of this classroom filled with a lot of those CPR dummies. I think they call them Annies or something. And he sort of didn't like that or whatever. But anyhow, the health class came in after his. So one day he put a cassette inside the dummy set to say something like, "Help me," or "Get me out of here," or something. And next teacher, Arlene Boyd, I think, came into the class to teach her class, and she was surprised, and I don't think she was pleased, but John had a good time. He was a great teacher, and he cared about all of his students. He used his psychological insights to help his students, and he brought his whole self into the classroom, and his humor and his wry humor was always appreciated by his colleagues. We had a Wednesday lunch group that met in Richard Voorhees' office, and that was always a good time when John was there, because he would lighten things, even though we all were spending some time complaining about who knows what. So John was a great colleague and friend and teacher, and his memory will live on. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for being here. I want to honor Mr. D was one of our lovely attendants that came and helped take care of John. And Christique was to be here too, and she got called away, but thank you so much for coming. You know, when people come in your home and take care of your loved one, they become kind of family too. So appreciate that a lot. Kira and Mark, this has been wonderful. You did a great job, the whole family. Just, do you see why I'm so fortunate? I lost my best friend to cancer, but I'm surrounded by love and support. This church, Rossmore, other places around the world. I have some friends in India who are watching this. God is good, and I appreciate each one of you. I'd like to say a special hi to Keith and Yvonne. Keith and Yvonne are like family members. Keith and David, and they came to San Francisco first. We came out and visited once in a while. Never dreamed we'd ever move here. We retired and escaped Minnesota winters and went to Florida. And then pretty soon, Michelle ended up in California, and Kira ended up in California. So, of course, we wanted to come and be here also. But when we did come here, we became grandparents to Eva, because her grandparents were in Minnesota or China, and so we were happy. And I think in some of the shots on the screen, Grandpa was visiting with Eva at school because it was Grandparents' Day, so we were happy to fill in. The morning before John made his transition, I was at my regular seat by the bed. He was medicated strongly because the pain was intense. It was his decision. He said, I can't take this pain anymore. And he was with hospice, and we thought we were really giving him the max. And I said, well, you know, when you give you more medicine, you kind of get upset because you really lose a little bit of your awareness of where you are. And he said, that's okay. So we gathered around him, and that last morning, both Mr. D and Christique were there, and Kira. And I was at my regular position there, holding his hand, and once in a while, you know, fussing with his hair, just to know I was there. And I suddenly became so overwhelmed with a feeling I hadn't had, like I was going to lose it. I was just going to absolutely explode. I felt I was going to lose control of who I was. So I let go quickly and I went to the living room. And my heart was beating. Christique followed me. And I knew I had to calm down. I had to do something. Maybe I could meditate. And I know Mr. D had been rubbing my back and trying to help me stay sane. So I went into the living room and I sat in a chair that kind of rocks, and I'm trying to breathe evenly and get my breathing calmed down. And it started to ease a little bit and slow down. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear, "Let it be." And I thought, oh, thank you, because my word for the year is guidance. Oh, so I took another deep breath, and I'm sitting there feeling myself calming down. And all of a sudden I thought, hey, wait a minute. I think I've heard that as a song. So I took a few more breaths, and I realized what was missing. I said, Alexa, will you play Let It Be by the Beatles? And I'm sitting there, this music comes on, and I'm feeling enlivened and myself again through the whole song. And I thought, that was really, I'm back. I'm back. Just let it be. Or let go and let God. And I just was so relieved to hear those wonderful, soothing words. And when I told the family about it, they said, that would be a good thing to sing. So our music directors here, Tyler and Lisa, are going to lead us while we sing this lovely song that will always be different for me now. And I really grew up in the time that the Beatles were famous. They weren't popular in our home because we were very conservative, But I've certainly learned to appreciate their talent and their message. Oh, and John,
Ron's
thank
gonna
you.
help us
Ron
out.
is going to sing too.
Yeah, and Ron is helping me out, and you all need to join in. This is not a solo. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom.
Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines in me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comforts me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. One more time. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be.
That is a nice picture. I just want to stand next to this guy. Sisu and humor and devotion. These are a few of the wonderful characteristics that John embodied for us, expressed for us, and hopefully inspires in us to be more of that, to be more of the best that we are, the best characteristics that we hold, to live from that place. We have a way of blessing folks in unity, and it's a special way of just honoring and sending them our love and our appreciation and the truth that we behold in them. So I want to invite you to help me bless John. We know he's already on his way, well on his way, to wherever his next dwelling space, so to speak, is, and just to come from that place within our hearts that we've been in all this last hour or so together. So let's send our blessing to John. John, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divine light within you. Thank you for gracing our lives with sisu, humor, and devotion. Thank you for being here. The celebration continues over in our community room, and there are restrooms on the way. So more celebration, more joy, more laughter, perhaps more tears to shed. Thank you all. I apologize, I was looking at
quite well.